Welcome. Let's get started in a comfortable seat. So cross-legged position, full lotus, half lotus, doesn't matter. Just as long as you've got a nice bit of length in the spine, shoulders back and down. And as you feel that you get into a comfortable position, close your eyes. And just for a second, pay attention to your breathing pattern. Feel the inhales and exhales passing over your top lip. Remember, in yoga we breathe through the nose. And instead of simply noticing your breath, take control by lengthening the inhales and the exhales. And as you feel the breath deepening a bit, become aware of the placement of your tongue in your mouth. So ideally you want to place the tongue against the palate of the mouth. Subtle pressure against the roof of the mouth. If you make use of Ujjayi pranayama, you can now start with your Ujjayi, that ocean-like sound. And if Ujjayi is not a part of your practice, then just keep the breath deeper than usual. Continue the breathing and slowly open your eyes. Let's get to all fours. So you'll get hands below the shoulders, knees below the hips. Tuck your toes, get a little bit of weight onto the feet, just gently float your knees off the mat and shift a bit of weight back and forth. So it's more a case of warming up in the wrists and at the same time getting a little bit of activation in the quads. As you push the hips closer to the heel, you'll find that there's a bit of quad activation. As you keep doing this movement, become aware of your core. Is it completely passive? Are you making use of some core muscles to stabilize in the back? That would definitely be a good bet. And bring it back to a neutral position as you bring your knees down. Push your hips all the way to the heels and now take your downward facing dog pose. So as you get into this upward facing, at least downward facing dog position, where the body's upside down, move your hips from side to side, so feel into the side body. Keep the breath consistent, and then as you come back to center, bend one knee and then opposite knee, feeling into the hamstrings. Make your way into a traditional down dog, meaning you're not walking around, just finding stability here. In breath, lower your hips into a plank shape. So as you bring the hips down, just like in that all fours position, hands below the shoulders, but feel that there's a little bit of core engagement. Exhale, take your hips back up into a downward facing dog. You might feel like we're off to a slow start, but it's more about detail, getting good activation. Use an inhale, lower the hips back into a plank, a second plank shape. Holding it there for a second. Notice if your breathing pattern is changing. Exhale, take it back up into a down dog. Bend into both knees, look up. You can step or walk your feet in between hands, getting the feet together. Halfway lift. Exhale to a forward bend. Inhale, take arms to ceiling, reach. Exhale into mountain pose. Interlace your fingers behind your back. Pull the shoulders back and down. Feel that you're opening or broadening in the chest. You get an inhalation in this shape. Exhale, forward bend, working your arms slightly over your head. So feel the stretch. And then just simply relax your hands onto the mat with an inhale, halfway lift. Plant your hands onto the mat. Exhale, step back and move through a knees, chest, chin. So you can bring knees down, chest and chin comes down. Inhale into an cobra or upward facing dog, depending on how high you lift the chest. Tuck your toes, exhale back into a downward facing dog pose. You are stretching the heels towards the floor, even if they don't touch. You are just thinking in that direction. Inhale, raise your right leg. Exhale, squeeze knee into chest. Then place your foot in between hands. Bring your back knee down. As you bring the knee down, get both hands onto the front knee. And this time around, keeping the knee in line with the hip, straighten your arms as you push away from the knee. But the hips keep sinking forwards and down. You stretch away from the front knee. If you perhaps get dizzy from looking up and back, you can keep the gaze forwards. If it feels okay, take your head back. Slowly bring it back to center. As you bring your hands down, walk your foot to the side. Now the idea is for your right knee to simply open out to the side. So first get the knee to move as far away from your right shoulder as possible, and then use the right hand to adjust the knee a little bit further. There's no need to keep the right foot firmly on the mat. The knee can drop out to the side. Bring the knee back in. Position the foot in line with the hip, hand down, tuck toes, step it back. Exhale to chaturanga or knees, chest, chin. Inhale, up dog. Exhale, downward facing dog. Inhale, raise your left leg. Exhale, knee to chest, but then place your foot between hands. Back knee comes down. Both hands onto the front knee. The knee in line with the hip. Push away from the front knee. And if you can, look up or relax your head back. Slowly bring it back to center. Bring the hands onto the floor as you walk the left foot out. Tilt the knee away from your body. And then place your left hand onto the inside of the knee, adjusting the knee a little bit further away. Bit of hip opening, really. Bring your knee back to center, walk foot to the midline or to in line with the hip at least. Tuck toes, take it back. Plank to chaturanga. Inhale, up dog. Exhale into down dog. Feeling the arms being straight in down dog. You've got a flat back. The breath is consistent. Bend into your knees. Walk your feet to the middle of the mat, but get your feet mat distance. So nice and wide. Close the gap by walking your hands towards the feet. Firstly, place both hands onto the tops of the feet. Inhale for as much of a halfway lift as you can. Now, if you don't have the hamstring flexibility, you'll keep your knees bent and still get length in your spine. But if you are flexible enough and you can keep the legs straight, do that halfway lift. On an exhale, relax the crown of the head down. So just the standing forward bend with the feet being a little bit wider. We'll make it a bit easier by doing halfway lift on inhale. This time round, maybe get onto the fingertips. Pistol grip the big toes. On exhale, pull yourself a little bit deeper into a forward bend. The wrists are relaxed, but you're actively pulling to get the crown of the head closer to the floor. But you pull shoulders towards your waist. Inhalation, halfway lift, you straighten in the arms. Place your downward facing dog hands on the mat. Step the feet back into down dog. Inhale, raise your right leg. Exhale, step right foot in between hands. Find your balance. Come up with hands to prayer, balancing on the right foot. If it's quite intense, you might get the toes to touch the mat at the back. But as you gain confidence, you'll just raise the back leg. And if you want to make it a little bit more intense, tilt the left hip down so that we keep the hip square. And slowly start to bend into the knee, step the foot back, bring your hands down, step right foot back, Chaturanga Dandasana. Inhale, up dog. Exhale to down dog. Inhale, raise your left leg. Exhale, get foot in between hands, finding your balance. Come up, hands to prayer. You can point or flex, but rotate the right hip down in order to keep the hips square. Start to bend into the grounding leg. Step your foot back, hands onto the floor. Step it back to plank. Place knees onto mat. And take a nice, relaxing child's pose. We'll be working into the hips with our next position or posture, so enjoy your child's pose before we stretch into the hips. Use your in-breath to make your way back up onto all fours, but then simply turn sideways on your mat. Separate the knees as much as feels comfortable for your body. So you don't want to take it too far. You do, however, want to keep the heels in line with the knees. So separate the knees, come down onto the elbows and forearms, and we want to keep the hips more or less in line with the knees. So shifting weight forwards would maybe be too easy. Pushing the hips too far back might become a little bit too challenging. So find that position where you feel as though you can stay and get a nice stretch in the inner legs, groin area, the hips. As your body gets used to the position, maybe you feel the need to take the knees a bit further apart. Should you wish to do that, you can reach with one hand towards the knee you want to take further. You kind of just use your hand to move the knee a bit further. It might just be easier than sliding the knees out. I know how yoga mats tend to be, or have a lot of grip, making it less easy to slide. If it gets really intense, just stick to the deep breathing. It's the only thing that helps when you do a posture that's uncomfortable. It's time to get out of this one, so you'll get back up onto the hands and then start to lift your chest. Let's bring the knees together. And you can sit up. Take your one leg out to the side. Doesn't matter which leg you start with. You can point with the toes away from the body. Let's place hand onto shin. Take opposite arm up. First, reach up. Imagine I take your wrist and I pull up to ceiling. And then start to reach over towards the foot. So a nice stretch in the side body. Just keep reaching. Inhale. Slowly make your way back up. Bring your straight leg in. Switch legs as you get the opposite foot out to the side. One hand onto the shin, or maybe onto the ankle if you have the flexibility. Opposite arm reaches up and then over. And it doesn't matter if you don't have a tremendous amount of flexibility with these lateral movements. Wherever you get stuck, that's where you hold it. That's where your body is benefiting from the yoga practice. Use your inhale to come back up. And this time round, you can bring your hands onto the floor as you get the knees together. The idea is to get the feet mat width apart. So get weight onto the hands, step your feet wide on your mat. If you don't quite get the feet all the way to the edges of the mat, then obviously you just go with your limit. But see if you can keep your hands on the floor. Take a nice deep inhale, lengthening your back in this wide stance. Exhale, bring your face closer to the floor. So you might want to adjust the hands, get them more in line with the feet, but just get your nose closer to the floor. Inhale, pushing away from the mat, hands below the shoulders. Breathe in this position. And for another lateral stretch, walk your hands over to the one side. See if you can find your foot and bring your head closer to your knee. Once again, if your range of motion is not that deep, doesn't matter. Walk your hands back to center and over to the opposite foot. Maybe you can't even grip hold of the foot. You just get your hands sort of closer to the foot and you still work your head towards the knee. Walking the hands back to center. Now this final one, we want to slide the feet a little bit further apart. If this is already your limit, then I'd suggest that you stay here, keeping a lot of weight on the hands. If it's a bit too much, heel toe the feet closer together. If you want to stretch a little bit deeper, maybe get your feet slightly off the yoga mat. But if you go with this option, you do keep a lot of weight on the hands. So there's no need to do this middle splits. But you just want to feel that you're stretching the inner leg muscles nicely. In order to get out of this one, let's start to walk the feet closer together. And then place your hands onto your waist. Inhale, make your way up into a standing position. Step to the front end of the mat. So as we get to the front of the mat, mountain pose, feet together, shoulders back and down, standing up nice and tall. Inhale, take arms up. Exhale, forward bend, head to shins. In-breath, halfway lift. Plant your hands on exhale, step back, straight into a downward facing dog. From down dog, we move into an upward facing dog, keeping toes tucked. So use the inhale, start to lower your hips. Keep toes tucked. Bring your hips close to the floor, chest up, shoulders down. And as you keep your toes tucked in this modify up dog, feel how the glutes and your upper legs play a role to keep your body in the shape. Exhale, take it back into a downward facing dog. Now bend into both knees, look up. You can step or jump into a seated position. As you make your way to seated, bring the soles of the feet together. Pistol grip the big toes. We're going to do an upright happy baby pretty much. So firstly, shift weight onto the sit bones. As you get a nice grip on the big toes, start to lift your feet. And as we get into this sort of upright happy baby position, think of happy baby on your back. The floor is forcing the spine to be straight. So if you find your back rounding, lift in the chest, get length in your back, and hold it here. It's a nice way to strengthen the forearms, really. You just find a spot to focus on, and you breathe. You can take a full inhale, use your exhale to bring the soles of the feet together, placing your feet onto the mat. So there's a gap between the heels and the groin. Interlace your fingers around the feet. Take an inhale to get length in your spine. Exhale, tuck your elbows around your back. Work your forehead closer to your feet. Inhale, slowly make your way up. Take your left leg out to the side. The right leg stays bent but heel to the outside of the body. With this sort of positioning, with the knees being apart, you're going to reach with the chest towards the left foot. Maybe you can find your foot, maybe the ankle, the leg, or even the left wrist as you go down. So see what type of positioning is more comfortable for your body. But we are stretching the left leg in isolation. Should feel quite good, especially if you push your heel down into the floor. With these forward bends, just always think about getting your chin or chest closer to the foot, as opposed to just reaching for the foot and rounding in your back. Inhale. Slowly make your way back up. And as you come up, just position that straight leg in line with the hip. So we bring it in, support with the hands, point with the toe, and get your heel to not touch the mat. So we're not lifting it high, we're simply just getting a bit of quad activation. You'll find that if you point and you lock your leg out, it's going to be a little bit easier to experience that activation. Bring the heel down. Let's switch legs. So now we're going to take the right leg out to the side, bend the left, You're pulling the knees apart so we get that space in between knees. Twist in the torso. Look towards the right foot. Start to reach down. Find your leg. Find your foot. Find your wrist. Whichever option works for you. Use the in-breath to come up. Bring your right foot in line with the right hip. Point with the toes, support with the hands, and float the heel off the mat. The tendency might be to lean back. Just want to feel a bit of support in the core and keep the legs straight. You can bring the heel down. Take your left leg out in front. So now we've got both legs straight. And do a little bit of a sequence for the back and for the hamstrings. So first position will be seated forward bend. Then we go upside down into plow pose. And then we'll do shoulder balance. Bit of an inversion. So take an inhale. Reach up with your arms. Exhale. Lean forwards with chest and chin. Find the outsides of your feet or the ankles if you don't have the flexibility. And feel that the hamstrings get a nice stretch. This is step one, or first posture of the sequence. Chest and chin closer to the feet. Inhale, lifting up. Exhale, release the feet. As you relax onto your back without turning your head, take your legs overhead. Point with the toes. If you cannot get the toes to touch the floor, then simply bend into the knees and get your knees closer to your forehead. But if you get the feet down, do so. Support your back with your hands and hold your plow position. Should you wish to take it a step further, interlace your fingers behind your back and work your arms into the floor. Very much like that lunge we did early on in the practice, really. In order to get into shoulder balance, place hands onto your back. Raise both legs. You can do one leg at a time if it's difficult, but you get upside down. If it's too intense, then lower your legs halfway. You don't have to get into a straight line with the body. Focal point up to ceiling if the legs are only lifted halfway. So you'll pretty much sort of stay into the legs towards the ceiling. If the legs are straight, you look at the toes, slightly past the toes as your focal point. Almost done with the inverted position. So the way we get out of the posture is by lowering the legs a little bit, bring the arms onto the floor, and then start to cool down onto the mat. There's no rush. You're going to feel one vertebrae at a time making contact with the floor. Your heels will be the last thing making contact with the mat. So as you relax onto your back, let's take a second. in sort of corpse pose, just for 20 seconds or so, completely relaxed. Scan your body. After the 3 postures that we did now, you might find that there was a bit of a release in the back. Maybe it feels a little bit tight in the lower back. Just scan your body. You can bend both knees, grab hold behind the backs of the knees and make your way up into a seated position. Let's get into a comfortable seat, just like the way we started the practice, but we modify it slightly by getting the arms in a specific position. So we'll get thumbs and index fingers to meet, the pads of the thumbs and index fingers, stretch out the other fingers, bring your arms out in front. Now use as little energy as possible as you relax the arms down to keep the arms straight. So the arms stay straight, but you're using as little energy as possible in order to keep the arms straight. As you do this, bring your chin closer to your chest. Don't close your eyes. Just feel that you stretch the neck out. You have a nice flat back. You can soften your gaze, but don't fully close the eyes. Slow down your breathing to the deepest inhales and exhales that you've done in this class. Slowly get your breath to return to a natural state, and you can lift your head, and we'll make our way back into corpse pose. So being in this calm state, simply just relax back, close your eyes, and for the first time in the practice, your breath can be absolutely natural. Stay in this corpse pose for as long as you want.